This is our third panel, our last panel, but certainly not our least. And this panel will provide a unique view from a parental perspective. We heard earlier, and we all know that parents are their child's first teacher. And therefore, providing encouragement and empowering families is very important to ensure that they play a critical role in the successful educational outcomes of their children. So this panel will begin the discussion in terms of what is being done to engage parents in our communities. So I will turn it over to Anthony Tassi, our moderator.
Thank you, Monique. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Great to see you all. It's been a great morning so far. What a powerhouse group of speakers and people here participating from the audience. Great to see so many of you. And there does have to be the best panel in every conference. So we're glad to be here. And I was glad to hear there are people here from Buffalo and Schenectady and other places that I've heard of but have never been to. I assume those are in the very far reaches of the Bronx, past Eastchester and Co-op City, out where the subway is, where there's no more subway. But let me start by asking, just for a show of hands, who are the parents here today? Okay. Wait, keep your hands up, keep your hands up. And add any primary care, non-parent, keep your hands up, non-parent primary caregivers. Well, this is, so look around. Part of this equation is finding each other in any group and coming together in the coalition we need to come together at. But I'm surprised to see some of your hands up because you look really well put together and well rested. I can imagine you had a shower today and you combed your hair, which is a remarkable achievement. Congratulations. I know you have a lot of other things going on. I want to say I'm Anthony, I don't know if I said I'm Anthony Tassi from Literacy Partners. And our thing is trying to close the achievement gap among young children by empowering the parents through education. Low parental education levels are a key driver of limited student achievement in the early years. So that's what we do. And listening to the panels this morning, I had a couple of thoughts that I wanted to share before turning the discussion over to the other panelists. One is, and these are kind of a couple of global thoughts. One is, it occurred to me in listening to all the different nuances that were brought up from the very opening remarks to right before we started, it would probably be really helpful for parents and extremely helpful for children if racism were eliminated. And I think that's something that was behind a lot of the issues that we're dealing with together. And I think if we could also get a hand with our white privilege and our ethnocentrism in dealing with some of these issues, things would probably go better for parents and definitely for children. And I was also very pleased to hear a consensus among everybody here that we should move away from finger wagging and advice for parents. If advice works, we'd all be perfect because we get advice, in buckets every day. And so I think it's great that folks are really oriented towards moving away from corrective action with parents, more towards supporting them to play the roles that they already are equipped to roll, because every parent does the very best that they can, and to approach them with a list of things to do every day, assuming that they're not doing everything that they can, probably is not going to advance the relationship and is not going to advance our mutual goals. And last thing I wanted to point out before moving forward is the notion that 80% of the brain development game or 90% of brain development happens 0 to 3 is, perhaps it's helpful to motivate parents with their youngest child, but it has a real downside, that message. Because the message I hear is, oh crap, I blew it with my 5-year-old. And as somebody who does adult literacy, the message to me, if I hear that, is, oh, things are much too late for me. And what we know is that as parents gain skills, they transfer them immediately to their children. So what I think we want to communicate is the special and unique opportunity from 0 to 3 or whatever the cutoff is, but I think we also want to give people a reassurance of the malleable nature and of cognitive development over a lifetime and the growth mindset where the end all is not an assessment score at pre-K, K, 1, 2, 3, but it's really a lifelong love of learning and a sense of accomplishment through effort. You know, I think that's kind of the core of the growth mindset and the satisfaction and achievement that comes from that. So with the 2 minutes we have left for our panel, let me turn it over to, I'll introduce very, very briefly, as is the mandate here, to Frank Hernandez, who's has already gotten his shout out from a previous panelist, is a superstar principal in the Bronx, somewhat closer in than Schenectady or Buffalo. And then we'll also be hearing from Aracelis Lucero, who's doing some amazing work with Mexican-American students and their families. And then finally from Angel Martinez, a parent leader also from the Bronx. Yes, we're like, the Bronx is rocking the house today. So Frank, let me turn it over to you. Why don't you tell us what you do, give us your take on the role of parents in the process of improving student outcomes.
Thank you, Anthony. Good morning. It's truly an honor to be here on behalf of our school and community, and being a part of this discussion in addressing what oftentimes is outside of our sphere of influence. Addressing the health barriers to learning is important. So thank you for this opportunity. We're a proud partner with the Children's Health Fund, as you've known earlier, and a proud partner of Read NYC on our campaign for grade level literacy. I think that, but before I begin, I just want to share with you so that we can almost calibrate and understand that there's a difference between parental involvement and parental participation. So let's first get a common definition of, for me, what participation is: parents attending workshops, attending events at schools to actively participate. My mother was a single parent of 4 children, and I can't tell you that she wasn't in every single one of the events at school, but she was involved, and being involved means providing the structures at home for us and the supports via technology and resources to be successful. She minimized the stressors that existed in our home so that we can come to school healthy and ready to learn. We had the supplies that were necessary to be successful. So it's important to define the distinction between parental involvement and engagement. Engaging parents as partners is critical, I believe, to my leadership and tantamount to the overall success of our schools and our children. Focusing on educating parents and families is a priority for us, and we do that because we know that parents want to help and want to be present and want to be supportive, and oftentimes they don't know how. So simple things like homework help, simple things like strategies for math, because often our families are learning strategies that they didn't learn as students growing up. And now with our partnership with Children's Health Fund, addressing those health barriers, educating them about the importance of attendance, about the importance of addressing. I'm an asthmatic myself, so that's not an excuse to not come to school, but if we are remediating it with the appropriate services, then we know that our children can come to school every day. So monthly parent workshops around those areas, an adult learning institute that we offer on Saturdays with respect to ESL and computer classes and basic literacy and math, and like we do with our students, offering them recreational opportunities. So arts and crafts and Zumba dance helps gets parents in. Accessibility and information we know is an important part of that work as well, and creating environments that are welcoming for parents and families, and targeting workshops that address their particular concerns and needs. And we talked a little bit earlier about biculturalism and cultural sensitivity, so providing translation services in all of these opportunities is important in engaging our parents. We know that one of our most successful strategies is combining student performances with workshops. So you have a play and you provide a workshop. You know, the parents will come and participate. And providing that flexibility, so we'll have workshops at 9 and workshops at 5 p.m. Really kind of eliminate some of the real life barriers. You know, I work, I can't come during the day, and so a 5 p.m. workshop works for me, whereas other parents work later on and can attend in the morning. So those are all of some of the ways that we try to successfully engage parents, and the result has been that parents, 97% of them feel that school is headed in the right direction, and that that the school has high expectations for their child, because when we cannot develop children without developing, you know, families and communities simultaneously.
Great, thank you, Frank. I love these ideas of meeting parents where they're at. I heard the seed of an idea of integrating early literacy promotion into Zumba classes. I'm all for that. Please invite me to your opening. I'd love to see that. And let me ask you, Aracelis, to introduce yourself and give us an overview of what you are up to.
So I'm the executive director of MASA. MASA is a nonprofit that started out in Mount Haven by an undocumented student in 2001. And we promote educational attainment, committed leadership, and civic engagement among underserved students living in New York City, but we do focus on the Mexican community. And I just want to give a brief explanation as to why. We serve all immigrant communities. That's like what we really, our strengths are, but we focus on the Mexican community because in 2000, the census figures came out that about 47% of Mexican youth between 16 and 19 were dropping out of school or were like not involved at all. Fast forward to 2010, the figure is now 41%. It got better, but that's still close to half of our youth that we are losing. And so MASA was really started volunteer-led, grassroots, parent-driven. They dictated pretty much their needs, and a group of students started responding to those needs. And so right now we have programming from early childhood education to K through 12 support, transition into college and beyond. And interestingly enough, what started happening was that we started realizing we had to go younger and younger. And so we have started to focus on the earlier years, but you're completely right. One of the things that we really like to do is we don't do anything without the parents. The parent in every early childhood, our K through 12, high school, we engage them, and it's equally important for us to help them develop so that they can advocate for their children, so that they can ask for the resources. And so that in our community, really what works is word of mouth. And so if we take a select few families and help them through the process, the likelihood that they're either going to refer them to come back to MASA or disseminate that information is very, very high. And there's a lot of mistrust in our community. So we've really worked very, very hard over the years to make sure that MASA is a safe place and that parents understand that they have a voice. And sometimes it's a little complicated because there's so many different voices and how they want to do things, but we do help provide a process to accomplish that. And we're in the process of setting up a parent committee. So we're very proud because after years of working in the community and going from serving 10 families, last year we served 287 families, we're now starting to see these parent leaders who are kind of ready to start building other parents. We worked with Parent Action Committee. I think making sure that we give them a voice to also count their voices and have other people's hear that is very important, and we really always try to facilitate that process while we're making sure that we provide the immediate homework help, the tutoring, and also helping them feel incorporated into the community. Don't be afraid to go to the school. These are your rights. You are supposed to be provided with translation services. So that's in general a huge overview of how we approach our work and try to work with our community and newcomers to feel more comfortable in being involved in the educational life of their kids.
Great, thank you very much. Speaking of parent leaders, I'd like to invite Angel Martinez to introduce herself.
Hello, I'm Angel Martinez. I'm a parent leader with Parent Action Committee, and as you've heard, we have done some other work with CBOs or community-based organizations that are also in the Bronx. And I think that one important piece of our work with approaching parents and also working with parents is that you not only have to empower parents or to let them know that their word counts, but you also have to educate parents as well, whether it's things that are going on in the community or within the school system. But a lot of time parents aren't aware of those rights and of those responsibilities, but they also don't know what they can do about it. And that's one great thing about the Parent Action Committee, is that you're inviting parents to this space to share their ideas and to voice their concerns and take from that to create these great things that can come out of it and identify what are the needs of improvements, what is a plan of action. And one great thing that we were able to do was we wrote a persistent educational failure in our district, which was a proposal about identifying what was going on in our district. What have we seen? And also we provided recommendations. And out of those recommendations, we insisted that there was some training for new teachers to come in. And through that, we were able to get a big win from the Department of Education, which is that now we have a new teacher mentoring program that is implemented. And we did that by not only collaborating with the Department of Education, but we started from the ground up. We spoke with parents, and from then we had conversations and presented that to the principals. And from that, we got the advice and the input from the principals, and then we approached the DOE with this. And so that was really great. And a lot of the teachers who have gone that we were able to speak to, they said that they really love it. And you understand where the children are coming from, and you're able to get that training and to understand what you are going into on a day-to-day basis when you're going to work. And that has been really great for us to be proud of as parents, because we know that it started with us. This was started with us, and this is something that the entire school and our entire district is benefiting from. And also we've done some great work with our Bronx School Justice, who I can proudly say was another part of our organization. And they were able to identify that the amount of arrest and summons was just way too high. And having conversations with parents and getting the DOE on board, but also the NYPD School Safety Committee to provide workshops and trainings and to understand what each person's perspective was, and to provide space to where everyone was able to share their position. We were able to lower the amounts of arrests and summons by 56% across the board, and we're extremely proud of that. Yes, clap. So that's an overview of what we have done. But the most important part of the work is collaborating with the parents and allowing them to have that space to share, and for everyone to know that there's an investment here, and the investment is to improve the quality of school climate and also education for our children.
That's great, Angel. I love the idea of the teacher mentoring program and the other things you spoke of parents taking leadership to create win-win-win arrangements of parents, teachers, and principals, and administrators together. And I'm curious, can you tell us about how you set your priorities for what the Parent Action Committee really works on. Not so much the democratic process, but more
Right.
of thinking like, where do you have the most impact? Is it in the community? Is it in the school culture? Is it in a specific, issue, very small issue in the school? How do you figure
Yes,
that out?
that can get very, very complicated. So the best way to filter what our needs are is to have these conversations at the table with ourselves before we approach parents or a school, because we have 55, elementary and middle schools in our district alone, in District 9. But you can't go to every single school with a different agenda or, to provide, access and solutions for those needs. It's just way too broad. But the way that we filter and narrow it down is we look at the data and we see what looks like the most needs improvement areas. Is it literacy? Is it, transitional housing? What does that look like for us, for our community? What are the highest areas of needs? And by identifying that, then you're able to say, okay, what looks like a realistic win for us, or what looks like we can realistically approach and really be authentic and engaging parents? Does this seem like it's an administration issue? Does this seem like, parents can really do something about this issue? And from filtering from that, then we're able to say, okay, what would be the role of the parents in this? Because before you involve someone, you need to identify where their strength can be utilized. And that is very important. Otherwise, you're gonna get parents who are discouraged because they don't see how they fit into this equation. So after you identify those areas, then you identify what parents are affected by that. And also, in identifying what parents are affected, you identify what parents can also help, who have been through it, or who, have a stake in it, because it's not just about my child who's sitting in that classroom, it's about the child next to them who's sitting there who can affect, my child. So it's about identifying those parents and utilizing them. And then from that, you get them all at a table, and you have these long sheets of paper. And you start to just jot down all the ideas that people have, all the concerns, and then we're able to categorize what is the situation, and then what is the solution that comes out of that. Because a lot of times when you just speak, sometimes you're giving out ideas at the same time and you don't even know it. And a lot of that conversation and communicating has, come from a place where people just don't know that they're capable. And then when you, write it all down, and when you let them see it, they identify, okay, I see what it is now. And then from that point, you put it in a nice little proposal, and then you identify, okay, now who are the people that we need to take this to? How do we show that this is what the needs of the community is? What are the needs of the parents? And how does this then lead to success? And then once you have those meetings with those different stakeholders, then you allow for collaboration to happen, and you insist on it. And then from there, you move forward to presenting it to the necessary, structures, whether it's DOE, whether it's NYPD, and then you can move forward with the work.
That's great. So it sounds like your process is fully Common Core aligned.
Yes.
Which is great.
That's the simplest way I can put it.
And are there paid staff involved, or this is 100% parent volunteers?
No, we have our organizers, of course, but all the parents, no, this is just all us. We don't get a stipend. However, I would be open to that, Emma. No, but we no, but we all have jobs, and that's the thing. If you look at it, we have people work in finance. We have I'm a mentor, and we have another parent who's worked in paralegal. We have retired parents. We have even parents who are retired educators in our group. So it's a lot of diversity within us, but this is true passion for us. And how we get parents on board is for them to see that if we're passionate about your child's education, and if we're willing to help, then you should do the same as well. And without saying that, I think that the work proves for that.
Right. Well, I'm all in favor of parents getting stipends
Yeah.
for whatever they do. I'm in favor of it. Frank, so we've heard the community organizing perspective and the agents of social change from outside the four walls of the institution. Tell us about how you prioritize and how you make choices in where you're going to put your attention vis-a-vis parents and and how that attention will lead to improvements that you're looking to make in your school.
So every spring, our families and teachers are given a learning environment survey, and they get to speak specifically on 3 areas: school culture, instruction, and I'm losing the other one. I'm losing the third one. So we use that to really anchor our support and what we do. And from there, our school leadership team decides together on what are the appropriate approaches to addressing the concerns. How can we refine, and the survey allows us to engage in a process of refinement and reflection, and from there, implementation of whatever change. And one of the things, speaking of the Common Core standards, that the parents shared concerned about is helping them understand, unpack the standards, and helping them find ways to provide opportunities for their children to engage in some of the shifts. For example, in reading at home and building their stamina is an important part of what they can support as a structure at home. So our work is anchored through or with the support of the Learning Environment Survey and the input from our school leadership team, which is made up of, in our case, 5 parents. So we have equal representation between parents and school officials, teachers, and administrators.
And thinking just about grade level reading, for example, 3rd grade level reading, what would you say are the 1 or the 2 most important areas that you'd want to engage parents on to really move the dial on 3rd grade level reading?
So the number one thing is understanding the threads of reading, and one of them that's often ignored is comprehension. So we often hear my child can read, and it's only based on their ability to decode and not understand and make meaning from what they're reading. And the other thing is providing, once again, we can't emphasize that enough, structured opportunities for students to access text. And this is all different types of text, literary and informational, and different text types from the newspaper that we heard an earlier panelist mention that she often gets every day at her home, in addition to some of the books that they take from school, comic books and different text types that expose students to different genres. That accessibility is for us, I guess, the second most important thing.
Great. I'm going to open it up for questions in just a minute, so get ready. But before I do, Aracelis, I'd like to hear your perspective within MASA and the community surrounding it. What are the top priorities you see? What are the top opportunities you see for having significant impact through parent engagement, parent involvement, parent participation, as Frank said?
Well, one, to continue to hear their voices. Every month we have a monthly parent meeting with them where they voice, we talk about administrative stuff and what's going on and like the most common challenges that they're seeing either within the organization or with their children. And we generally, at the beginning of the year, give them a parent survey, asking them all sorts of questions, both like, check off the box to open-ended questions, and we also ask them about the goals that they have for their children. So when it comes to the children, we take that and we feed that information to our tutors who partner with us to help get these across. But when it comes to the parents, we have to get very creative in what they're asking for support and what we are seeing some of the needs are. So it's very clear that we started doing ESL, but most of our or a good portion of our population, I would say about 75%, only have primary or secondary schooling education, so that becomes a real barrier to being able to support their children at home. And so that's one of the areas where they ask for the help, but we started doing more Spanish literacy classes, and we have a group of indigenous families that now we're trying to figure out how we incorporate them, because even in the parent meetings, we realize that they might be a little lost. So we internally try to keep an eye out to make sure that everybody's being incorporated in the process, and to continue to do the things that we've seen have worked, but also ask them other things that they want to do. Another way that we partner with them is to really help them understand that it doesn't matter what level of education you have, you can do so many things to help your child at home, to engage them, to ask questions, just to talk to them. Culturally, we try to merge the traditional practices that their abuelitas or abuelitas might have brought down to them, and they that are good practices to raise children, but that also, how do we use that to leverage engagement with them at home? So we try to get really creative. And talking about Zumba, we did a yoga class for kids, and the parents came, and really quickly we realized that the parents needed it much more than what the kids needed it. The kids were just like all over the place, and the parents were like, they were the last people standing. And so we kept on doing that. We also use it as a teaching moment where they, at the end of it, after they were so relaxed, they started talking about good parenting practices, or my child is going through this, or we get a lot of information just from doing informal things with them that just, it's creating a space for them to talk. And so we take that information and kind of do something with it. And it becomes difficult because you're always chasing and adjusting programming, but that's what we have to do in order to keep families engaged.
Great. I'd open it up for questions from the group here. It's great. I'm hearing, just as we're getting the mic to the right person to ask the question, I'm hearing a lot of data collection, a lot of data analysis, a lot of constant communication, feedback, prioritization, and authentic engagement with people. That's great. Yes. Does anybody have a question here? Yeah. Okay, a comment in the form of a question. We'll accept it as long as it's brief and generative.
Very, very brief and very generative. And,
Thank you.
As a person who's been in education for a long time, I commend the settlement group, and we would like to see that. I work for the Agency for Children's Services, and the New York City Early Learn program is trying very hard to get all of the child care centers to get the parent involvement that you have already established, because we firmly believe that you, as Principal Hernandez said, you cannot educate a child without the parent. But my own little pet thing is we're asking teachers to do more and parents to do more and partnership programs to do more. And I think a lot falls on mom and dad. And if the three-legged stool, the first leg of it, I believe, is mom and dad, if we keep asking her to do more, it's got to be very difficult, because mom's spending a lot of time working full-time. It takes two people to keep a roof over the head. So I commend you for being able to put your services out there. Thank you.
Frank, let me ask you a question off of that comment. Thank you for the comment. Is that fundamentally what you're doing? Are you asking your parents to do more? Is that sort of the business you're in this area, asking them to do more?
No, we're just asking them to learn more about, for us, in our particular community, there's a paradigm shift that has to take place, because I think that there's generational patterns of sporadic involvement And so helping them understand that although your parent perhaps was is not as educated as they would have as much as they would want you to be, or your parents didn't participate as much as you would have liked. That their involvement at home is the most important, and we're trying not to add to them, but again, because they want to participate, we try to educate them and share with them. And I also want to then to address that question and comment, talk about the importance of initiatives like the Healthy and Ready to Learn initiative that we're proud to participate with the Children's Health Fund, because I think most importantly they're providing access to mental health services and things like glasses. Parents don't have to go outside of the school for those services, so we provide almost a one-stop family experience in that they can get access to those services as much as education. So if they can get that in our school buildings more readily, then I think our children will be that much healthier, and our parents will feel less stress, because that is a valid concern, that they're often like, well, I don't know how to help my child, and so that'll address those issues.
Yeah, again, meeting parents where they're at. Yeah, did you want to say something, Angela?
Yes, and if I could just add to that as well, a lot of the creativity has to come from providing parents with options, such as what you just mentioned was a very important point. When I come home from work, or my husband, or other parents, it's very exhausting. And then you have this whole laundry list of things that you have to get through. And I think that sometimes we overwhelm ourselves with thinking that we have to get it done right away. But we have to be very realistic about our capabilities and also about our time constraints. But that doesn't mean that you don't have to be creative about it. And really effectively using the time that you have with your children can be a great way to start. Whether it's when you just want to go to sleep or just rest for 10 minutes, have your child read, the books that they have from school, or, record themselves. There's some great apps. Technology is great for kids. I don't know why. They love to use it and they know how. But when you have programs like, Dojo for the classrooms and for the teachers, and when you have Raz Kids to where they can record their own voice, and you're able to listen to those things while you're at work or on your lunch break to see how your child is doing and where do you see certain, things, or having them, write down, math questions that they have. Those are just a few things, but using the time effectively that you have with your children as a start. So that way you're not overwhelming yourself.
I'm going to go back in the back and then up here in front. Yes, way in the back.
This is a comment in the form of a question, I guess. I'm glad Aracelis spoke. I'm Dr. Joanna Tapelis from Maimonides in Brooklyn. I'm glad Aracelis spoke to the fact that we expect these I have huge Mexican population that I treat, and everybody expects that they be literate in English. A lot of times they are barely literate in their first language. So sending them to programs where they can learn how to read and write in Spanish is huge. And when I say, okay, they're very complacent because they live in communities where they really don't need English. Every phone you call says, oh, por español, la primera número uno. They're not really as motivated. One of the biggest things I find is I tell them, aside from all of that, you don't have to read War and Peace in English, but as they get older, you need to understand what your kids are talking about with their friends. And they look at me and they're like, oh, okay. And I send them to these basic English programs, and they come back, and you can see they're proud in themselves for being able to speak to me in English. Like, you see a different affect on their face. And their kids are like, oh, mom and dad are studying. I should do the same thing. So it's kind of leading by example for their kids as well, aside from learning what they're talking about with their friends as they get older.
Yeah, that's great. When we see that, we run adult literacy classes, so we see that dynamic every day. But let me turn to the panelists. I want to ask you about bilingualism. We heard a little bit about that. Somebody mentioned in an earlier panel. And in the school readiness space, if you will, bilingualism is still a contested issue. And for some reason, among wealthy parents, it's an unqualified good for their children to be bilingual, and they'll pay money for that. But for low-income children, it's seen as a threat to something. So I want to ask you about that, how you deal with the issue of bilingualism in your work. Maybe I'll just go right down the line.
Well, first you have to nurture the fact that people are diverse, and you really have to, I don't want to say appease, but you really have to appreciate what the backgrounds are and the contributions of people, because sometimes those barriers can leave you to miss out on a lot from individuals. But just as I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of things that parents can do in their native language that can help with the success of their child. Even if a parent can't read, they can listen, and they can effectively listen to what their child is giving back to them, and they can say, that doesn't sound right, or that sounds very good, I'm glad that you're progressing. But also if they can't read, they know what type of qualifying questions to ask, when it comes to literacy, okay, what was this book about? Who were the people who were in it? Things like that you can communicate, and it doesn't have to be in your native language. But also when parents come to our meetings, there's translation that's provided, but also they can work in the group with people who speak their native language so that they can come up with ideas and not going back and forth as far as I don't want to speak up, or I don't want to say something because not everybody's speaking my language. But then as a group, we come back together, and you see how progressively they start to speak up more because they feel like they are being heard and that they can contribute. And although my Spanish is limited to about 3 words, I'm starting to notice that even I am able to listen and hear certain sentences, and I'm not even aware of it, that I reply in English, but I understand what is being told to me in Spanish. But it's a great thing when you're working with an organization that's able to provide you with resources. And this year, we actually had Arabic and French families at our schools. Now, in the South Bronx, you're used to dealing with English and Spanish. So imagine that happening. But it was a great thing when our organizer was like, you need to get in contact with advocates, for children. And the response of the Arabic children who had someone on campus speak in their language, and my principal was like, he just had this bright smile on his face, But that's a great thing that comes from having that type of resource and identifying that these children do need, an advocate, and they do need to be identified.
Frank, literacy in any language versus learning English to be ready for school?
So we know that building on students' native language supports greater acquisition of the second language. So we're proud to offer bilingual programs for all of our students, and the amount of native language instruction then varies on their performance on an English proficiency exam. So if you want to engage families, you have to provide those opportunities to provide that. Those translation services for parent-teacher conferences, where we may not have for every parent workshop or PTA meeting translators. We do have for parent-teacher conferences translators who come and provide those services to families so that they know how their child is performing and what they can do to support their greater proficiency in English and academically overall.
So we're secretly big promoters of bilingualism. We don't like to tell parents what they should do, but we do believe that they should be presented with choices and informed about all their choices. We do speak to the economic advantages of being bilingual, trilingual. You try to use some of our examples. And one of the biggest challenges that we do have is with not only Spanish, but the indigenous languages that are being lost, and breaks my heart. But we do a home visiting program that's for 16-month-olds to 33 months old and up to in pre-K, and we deliver it completely in Spanish. The books are in Spanish, the home visits are in Spanish, and it's an evidence-based model that seeks to promote early literacy, parenting skills, and school readiness. So that's kind of our opportunity to go into the community and let them know that, you know, you should be using your primary language or any language to start early with your kids. But when we have parents come and ask us, well, you know, I don't want my kid in bilingual program because he's never going to learn English, or, you know, that's where we kind of have to be more diplomatic, because it's their choice, and we try to give them as much information as possible. So big promoters, but definitely we make sure that they are aware. And some parents have had some complaints about the ones that do want to promote bilingual education and dual language, which is hard to get in some schools, and there's this whole method, I guess, behind it to have parents ask. I think you have to have 25 parents. So we try to educate them. And if we find enough parents, then we can go together and ask for these services. But I think part of it is a stigma of, you know, native language and the fear that their kids are never going to learn English proficiently.
Yeah, and especially in the area you mentioned earlier of indigenous languages, it seems to me just an amazing opportunity, amazing cultural opportunity for everyone who lives here to have an opportunity to interact with people who still speak native indigenous languages and have that cultural heritage here in New York City. It's so amazing. And we have a Spanish literacy class for adults, for parents, and one of the things we're trying to do is kind of flip it to develop their Spanish literacy skills in the context of really honoring and celebrating the indigenous heritage and the indigenous, and part of that is also giving them an opportunity as a group, peers, to reflect on that piece with their children, you know, which is multi-layered and even more complex for people that are not, you know, mainstream Mexican culture that really have the indigenous heritage. So great work.
I just want to
Go ahead,
mention there's a couple of pilot programs. We might start doing this home visiting program in Mixteco or Nahuatl. We're trying to figure that out. But there's other organizations that are also trying to get on board with this, because it is becoming a huge issue, an area of concern. And so the Mexican consulate and other consulates are starting to look at bringing people from the home countries that speak indigenous languages, because there's a need for it, like right now, in hospitals, everywhere that you go. We get called all the time. And then there's the Endangered Language Alliance, who's also working on doing this, and the East Harlem Network. So I'm glad to see that happening.
Yeah. Up here in front, did you have a question?
This was a bit related to the conversation earlier of just one more thing for parents to do, and in the same way that the physicians feel like we have too much to do and the schools have too much asked of them, and I think the parents the same way. And I'm the parent I have a 6-year-old daughter in first grade, so I identify with certainly that as well. From a medical standpoint, I've found that often as much as how much you're asking a parent to do is also how far out of their comfort zone what you're asking them to do is, and how intimidated by that they are, because it's unfamiliar, and that makes it stressful and exhausting. And so, like, when you have a child with asthma, that's incredibly overwhelming if you don't know what to do and you're afraid of it and you're afraid you won't do it right and there's consequences. So we spend a lot of time trying to really empower our parents to feel confident, so that then what they have to do isn't so just draining and stressful and exhausting. And so as a parent of a 6-year-old, I'm seeing these Common Core things come home, and she came home with math homework the other day. I didn't know how to do it. You know, it had the little counting, and you have to count up, and I really didn't know how to do it. I had to look it up. And I wondered if that being a one more thing that people have to do isn't so much the one thing, but just feeling like they don't know how to do it. And I wondered if there's an empowerment approach to what you guys are doing to try and help people feel less overwhelmed, or to feel like those one more things, those 10 more things, whatever they are, but they're manageable because they're confident that they have the skills to be able to do it. that was kind of rambly. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So if I'll just talk about our school's philosophy on homework. And so again, when we discuss parental involvement, we don't want parents to help children with their homework. That's not the purpose. We want them to set up the structures at home so that students aren't multitasking, watching television and doing homework, right? Because homework is a formative assessment for us to let us know, because it's based on what the child learned in school, right? And so if you're struggling with it, that lets us know from a school's perspective that we need to reteach or do things differently. The other thing is, this is why we offer, so the other night, Tuesday night, we had game night. So we played math games that children play at school, but can also play at home so that they can support some of those skills that they're learning, so that they don't feel helpless. Oh, okay, I can play addition, top it. It's easy. And they don't involve additional money. They were given the templates and those resources. The other thing we do is have parent workshops to help them understand those math strategies. And newsletters that we give on a monthly basis also provide a valuable resources that they can use so that they're more empowered in the process.
So I think we have time for one more question, which I will ask if nobody else has one.
Back there. All the way in the back.
Oh, way in the back in the middle.
So once again, I also have a comment and sort of a call to action. And Anthony, if you want to translate it into a question, that's fine.
I thought you were going to say to translate it into Mixteca.
So my name is Safia Rahim. I'm from Literacy, Inc. And so there have been a lot of conversations about parent engagement and what that looks like. I just want to point out, and this has sort of been echoed by a lot of the other panelists throughout the morning, social interactions are really important in getting parents in the room. Anyone who is in the space of doing parent engagement, you know that a lot of times, you'll get the parents that naturally would show up because, they're the type of parent that shows up to everything, and then you end up preaching to the choir. And then the parents that you really want to help, present these tools and resources to, they're at home. And so, some of the work that we do through Literacy, Inc. is really building parent networks so that it's peer-to-peer. So we have something called the VIP Academy. It stands for Very Involved Parent. And so it becomes about giving parents the language to be able to speak with their peers about literacy learning, and they run their own small literacy programs, and it becomes I'm doing a literacy celebrations in the lobby of my building. I'm going to reach out to all my neighbors and my friends to bring their kids down and to read together. And I think, Aracelis, you were speaking about even doing the yoga. And the informal conversations around that, and someone was talking about, having the medical assistant having the casual conversation with the patient that was able to gather more information. So my call to action is that for the people in the parent engagement space that are looking to get more parents involved, it's really great to capitalize off of those social interactions.
Great. So we have come to the end of our time together. Boo. I can feel the disappointment. It's palpable. I'm sorry to break your hearts like this. But let me just do like a little lightning round. We heard one call to action. Is there a call to action, or maybe just something you didn't have a chance to say that's very important to you? Maybe we'll just go right down the line from Angel to Frank to Aracelis.
Okay, so in 45 seconds or less, let me try to do this. I would say that, and especially to a point where someone mentioned earlier that, having access to the schools was something that they were very worried about. And I think that was something that was very important. I think that it's very critical for schools to be open and more available to parents because by engaging with the parents and you're sharing, ideas and creating a platform to where you support them and allow them to contribute to their child's education, not only will you get, parent engagement, but also you establish some credibility. And you also, that then in turns the community to be more hopeful about the school culture and about the school system. So I think that that's something very important. And also, just to state that I do have brochures about what our organization has done and is doing that we weren't able to pass out. So if you guys are interested, just let me know. And we have plenty. So.
Mm-hmm. Great, because I want to take all of them back to my program. Frank, your final word?
My wish is to incentivize participation so that we extrinsically reward parents for their time and their efforts. We know that behaviors are motivated by rewards, and a simple gift certificate for their active participation in school will support them in another area. So I wish we had an opportunity or space to incentivize their participation, which for many is something that they feel comes naturally. In our community, it may not.
For the parent engagement piece, I guess what I would say is definitely to be creative. You need to be creative in order to be able to reach, and don't be afraid. And then I think that one of the things that has worked, for example, we partner with a couple of schools where they do have or don't know, or like have been trying to reach out to the Mexican community but don't know how, and that's where we started like the yoga and ESL class, and it made it a lot more inviting for the parents to come in, and one parent brought another parent who usually doesn't come, and so I think just being creative and really like trying to look for who those key people, community people are, even the parents. There's some great parents that you tell them one thing and like, they know how to sell it, and find those people, because you will get people in the door and then listen, and you have to compromise between what they're asking for and what you can or are willing to give.
Great, and with that, we'll end the panel. Thank you so much. This is great to hear from the three of you. Congratulations on your work.